Our next section is facilitating a synchronous session and promoting student engagement. This one is a little bit longer because there's a lot to this topic, and over the years of CIRTL synchronous programming, instructors have devised a lot of great strategies and tips. The first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of a lightning round of some kind of overall guidance. So the first is give time. Everything takes longer in the synchronous online environment. So if you plan a session, your session plan, count on the fact that it might take as much as 50% longer to do things. Directions, questions, it all takes longer. You need to give it that time so that people are able to navigate their way through the environment and the platform and get to the point of actually focusing on the content. Be specific, be as explicit as you can with your details. We've talked about some of this before, but if you're directing people to do something, how do they do it? Where do they go? Who's doing it? When are you going to do it? All of those details are, you can't be too explicit in kind of helping them navigate the platform when you're asking for their engagement or their feedback. Interrupt yourself. Don't talk for too long, but stop and ask for feedback, whether it's through emoticons or break it up with a discussion or ask for questions, insert a poll, click a question in there, put a whiteboard in, make sure people are comprehending the concept, ask for chat responses, just break it up with using the tools and getting their feedback in all sorts of different ways. Reduce cognitive overload. There's significant cognitive overload in teaching in a synchronous session, both for you as instructor and for the students, both. There's visual cues coming in, there's verbal cues coming in, there's written things coming in, there's so much coming in at once. And so you're talking, but you're also trying to track the chat window. There's also all the technical part of the platform. So there's a lot going on for you, but there's also a lot going on for them. So how do we deal with cognitive overload? Multiple streams of activity can be really challenging. So first off is just take the time that's needed. You don't need to rush it. Include small group work. That allows students sometimes to just back off and all of a sudden they're working with just 2 or 3 people. And that can sometimes be a bit of a break. As possible, use pre-class work and post-class follow-up so that they're clear on what the instructions are, what they have to read, what the assignments are, where they're going, how long they're going to be there. As I said, use multiple modes of engagement as we can. Review your class from a perspective of cognitive overload. The audio can be a problem, so speak slowly. I would also say plan out your session carefully. Think about including kind of directional signposts for both you and for the students. So some of those little icons that we're talking about in the lower right that tell the students what tool you're going to be asking them to use in this engagement. But you also might put those into your notes where you say this chat window for this or next slide here, and give yourself some of those internal cues. So use the tools thoughtfully. This is another one that we want to take some time to talk about. The basic idea here is that not to jump to use a tool, but you back off first and say, what's my goal for the student engagement here? Am I wanting to test their knowledge on content? Do I want to make sure everybody is heard? Do I want to provide a safe space for people to anonymously give feedback? Think about what your goals are and then what tool is most effective for that. This is one of my favorite activities, and if, before we get to that, so here's some of the, do you want a quick response, anonymous response? Do you want everybody to respond? Do you want a discussion? What are your goals there? This activity, if we were in a synchronous session, is I'd ask you to down here, use the whiteboard line draw tool and connect these outcomes to the various tools that could support that outcome. And it's not a one-to-one, that there could be several tools that could support any desired outcome or several outcomes that might be supported by a tool. But it's useful to really think about that if what you want to do is ease of use, that you want something just quick and easy, that might be the chat window, that might be emoticons, but that's very different than what you want is long, thoughtful responses. In that case, it could be a tool that's a little more complicated to use, but then that leads itself to that longer, thoughtful response. So it's really useful to think about. Do you want anonymity? Do you want all students to speak? A poll is really good for that, where you get all student input because you can see who's responded and who hasn't. And you can say, oh, there's still 4 people who haven't responded. We're going to wait until we get everybody responding and give them a chance to respond. So think carefully about what tools are available on your platform. But first, what are the goals? What are you trying to achieve with that interaction? I want to talk a little bit more about some of the polls and the things that they afford. We talked already about polls as clicker questions, and you can get yes, no, or multiple choice. And they're great starters for discussion, and they're a great way if you want to encourage full participation. If you want instant feedback from students, sometimes those emoticons can be really useful. It kind of wakes them up, but also chat window feedback is also something that students respond to fairly quickly. The chat window is kind of a student default mode. I think it's the most familiar to most students, the one that they kind of move to most. It's most kind of like texting and familiar to them. It can be good for students who are non-native speakers and might be more comfortable writing than they would speaking, or who don't have the audio computer capabilities. And it can be more accessible for a wide range of reasons. Mics and cameras. These, you have to push students often a little bit to have them use it. If there's some discomfort or some initial barrier to that, but once students get used to it, it can be a much more live and engaging discussion. The discussion can go more deeply. Again, you have to be careful that it's not always accessible to all students, but especially if you have a programming that meets multiple times, this can allow, they kind of can get used to the fact that they're expected to talk on the microphone or even put their camera on, and it becomes more familiar, and then you end up being able to create a much more sense of a full classroom community. Most platforms have some form of a discussion board. And again, if they don't, you can always link out to an external discussion board or whiteboard, as we said. That can be as simple as a slide that has a question on the top with the rest of it is blank, and you just have people use the whiteboard tool to type in their answers. Sometimes it can get very full, and sometimes we ask people to stop and take a minute and then look at the other responses now, see what other people have said. I find it very useful with a whiteboard to use a timer. Students can, if they know how long they have to compose and think about their responses, it allows them to spend the time that they have thinking and really being thoughtful about it. Sometimes when the timer goes off, you might say, I'm going to set it again for another 2 minutes for people just to read each other's response or read and respond to one of the other comments. So it can be, depending what kind of time you give it, it can be an opportunity to think fairly deeply about a complex topic or a very quick, short response. It's all anonymous, and so it has value in that. It can also be used here as a basis for discussion, where you can say, well, the person who commented on this, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to go onto your microphone and expand on that a little bit. And I've seen it used very successfully in that way. Breakout rooms. If your platform has capability for breakout rooms, I'd really encourage you to use them. They're the way that you can have that small group interaction that a lot of active learning techniques use, so that you can have people in just pairs or in groups of 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 in discussions. If you're going to use breakout rooms, a couple things. I would encourage you as instructor to jump from room to room so you can sit in on the rooms, find out what's being said, be aware of how the discussions are going and if people are having any issues. But I would caution that breakout rooms need a careful setup. This is one that can be kind of confusing and kind of a confusing experience for the students. So this brown box below is an example of a slide that was used for in a course that was having students go into breakout rooms to consider different case studies. And you can see the components in here. They're very clear. They have a whole slide dedicated to the mechanics of the breakout room experience. So they say there's going to be 3 breakout rooms, each with a different case study. And each room will have about 3 participants. When you move into a breakout room, it's often there's awkwardness of who starts, who is supposed to start this. And so if you say the first person on the list, in the participant list in your breakout room, is a facilitator. It's a random way to assign somebody and give them the agency to break the silence and start the discussion. You might also identify the second person or another person on the list to be the note taker, or if you're planning to have this breakout rooms report back when you get back to the full group, it's good to assign that to a certain person so they're prepared to do that. And then in this slide, the next bullet point, they let the students know exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing and how long they're going to be in the breakout rooms, and if they have any questions. It's pretty important for students to be very clear what it is that they're supposed to produce in this breakout room, so that they don't get there and say, what are we supposed to do? Or are we supposed to be writing this down? So they have some clear sense of what is expected of them when all the students come back and do a main room. The final thing I want to mention about the facilitation of a synchronous session is thinking about the roles of you as instructor or facilitator. If it's at all possible, it's great to have a second person helping you. That could be a co-instructor and you flip back and forth various tasks and roles, or it could be a TA or even an undergraduate who might be able to help. There's several things that a co-facilitator can do. There's often can be one person talking, another person can be monitoring the chat window. It's awfully hard to do both of those at the same time. They can also give technical support, especially to students who are having problems. If you break into breakout rooms, they can be jumping into the rooms or even facilitating a group discussion, be timekeeper. There's all sorts of ways that it can be very supportive. And again, if you're co-facilitating, you can switch off those roles. They don't need to be fixed. If you don't have that kind of support, one thing is just take your time. Breathe deep, don't rush it. You can just say, I need to take a minute here to read the chat to catch up on what you all have been saying in the chat room. Or I'm going to take just a minute to see if we can figure out why so-and-so's mic isn't working. And again, along with that, taking the time is being transparent and just letting people know what's happening and taking the time to do it. Usually, if you aren't being flustered, and if you're being transparent, it tends to decrease everybody's awkwardness about the silence. So that's it for the session on facilitating a synchronous session and engaging students.